For the base of this project, we need a 12-inch by 12-inch square of something to mount all this onto. I'm using 1/2-inch pink foam, and you can either get pink or blue. This is from Dow Corning. Just kind of ignore the thing I've got drawn on here. One thing that's really helpful to get your corners square, if you intend for them to be square, is to get a triangle of some kind. You can still get these at office supply stores. Really handy. Anyway, what I'm going to do is, I never really trust the corners that come on the foam to know that when they first manufacture them that they're actually truly square. So what I do is I cut one edge straight, and I'm going to go ahead and cut another edge. I'm just going to lay the triangle on here like this, and I'm going to go ahead and cut along the edge. Now I'm going to use this retractable blade. This thing right here works really nice. So I'm getting one side lined up here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the knife and I'm going to hold it straight up and down and cut across. Now, the tricky thing, especially if it's 1/2 inch or thicker, you think you're cutting straight up and down, but you may not actually be cutting straight up and down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut this, and this is what I believe is going to be straight. So I'm cutting straight up and down. I'm just going to lightly score across it like this. Okay? Lightly score across it, then I'm going to go with another pass, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper. And then I'm going to go with one final pass a little bit deeper than that. Okay, let's see how I did. If I look at the edge, yeah, I think I did pretty good as far as looking down on the edge if that edge is straight. It doesn't look like it's leaning one way. If anything, it looks like it's slightly leaning in, but that's probably better than it leaning out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure, and I'm going to cut another side. So I'm going to take my ruler, and I am going to measure 12 inches. And let's see, we'll just put it on 12 inches, and we're going to just put a mark right here, pretty much at 12 inches. And it would be handy if my ink pen worked. Let's try this with a marker instead. And I'm just going to put a dot right there about where 12 inches is. Then, one dot's all you need, because I'm going to flip this triangle over to the other side. And then I'm going to line that up, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this edge straight. Now, this is kind of awkward for me to cut this way, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin this around to where I can actually make a good cut. And since I can't do multiple cuts if I get it wrong, since this is exactly 12 inches, I'm going to do my best to try to get this straight up and down here. So I'm going to cut this right here, and then we'll go ahead and make another pass. And you want to be careful that you don't nick your plastic triangle. And we will go ahead and cut this, and there we go. Let's see how we did. Oh wow, I kind of really cut that in a little bit more. I don't know if you can see that, but it looks like this side right here is angled back just a little bit. But since this is my top, and since things are going to be blocked against here, that's probably going to be okay. I'll have to, when I make my next cut, adjust a little bit so I can try to get a little more straight up and down. If it was cut the other way, that would be a problem. Of course, I guess you could always just flip the foam upside down and then it would be going the right way, wouldn't it? Now for the bank, you're also going to need a couple more pieces of foam. These are 12 inches long by 4 inches tall, and it's a 1/2 inch. Basically what we need is 1 inch high by 12 inches by 4 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and glue this back here. I'll just go ahead and put a little glue on it. And then put these two together and set a heavy book on it and let it dry completely. And then once it's dry, then we can go ahead and start carving our bank. So let's squeeze these together. And now before we start carving the bank, we want to be sure that we don't cut the bank too far. So what we've got is and I've left this separate, so we're going to go ahead and cut it while it's easy to cut, because once you glue it down, it's probably a lot more difficult to cut. But this will give you an idea how the whole dock goes together. Basically, here's the dock pieces that are already painted. This piece will kind of go up here. Now, it doesn't have to go against the back right here. In other words, we're going to pull it out maybe an inch or so that the bank will kind of go down behind. And then what we've got is we've got kind of the stair piece that goes up against here like this. So, because if it was all the way back, then the stairs, they're not going to give you any ground behind here, and we don't need all this extra space in front. So we're going to scoot this forward about an inch, something like that. Now, with all this in mind, you kind of have an idea about where we can cut our bank. Now, if you take a look at the bank, I'm going to turn this a little bit. Whoa. And you'll notice that we've got kind of a big post right here. So we're only going to be able to cut this bank back about an inch. Because if you cut it further than that, we're going to have a post sort of hanging in the air here. So we'll basically, once we start cutting it, we're going to take a pen of some kind and we're going to go ahead and mark that. I'll probably just take a magic marker. I'm going to say, you know, I don't want to cut it any further back than that. And the same goes for the other side. You know, if we look at the other side over here, let's lay these down so they don't go flying. If we look at the other side right here, you know, our bank is going to be, you know, kind of out here at the top because we want a place for our post to set. Now, as far as where it's going to be cut out here, it doesn't matter. We can kind of cut this back and a little bit uneven, and that's how the bank is sort of sloping, and we can kind of do whatever we want out here because we really don't have anything setting here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this knife and I'm going to extend the blade all the way out, and that's what I'm going to use to cut this, and it's going to make a big mess. And don't worry too much when you're cutting the bank. This is pretty simple. Now, I'm going to try not to cut towards myself, you know, as much as possible. So if I do anything unsafe, just know that, you know, you're not really supposed to do that. Let's just start by cutting off the excess at an angle here. So don't worry about this too much. Don't try to, you know, let it stress you out or anything, because all we're doing is just cutting this at an angle so we've got some sort of embankment here. So I'm just going to slice this down. Okay, let's just kind of keep cutting this down. If you use sort of a sawing motion, it's probably a little easier to get this to cut. And I'm not worried about making this too awful even. And be sure your glue is completely dry when you glue these two together, otherwise they're going to kind of slide apart here. Let's see, I'm going to just cut this down. And when you need to cut back, like I said, try not to cut towards yourself. So I'm just going to cut down, cut back and pop that off, cut that out. Doing an inside cut is really kind of difficult. You can use a just a regular X-Acto knife for those type of cuts if you want. So I'm just going to make this a little bit, just a little bit irregular here. There we go. And we're going to cover this with dirt and ground foam, so if it looks pretty rough from the cutting of the foam, I wouldn't worry too awful much about it, because it's really not going to make that much of a difference. Okay, now that we've glued the bank on and the bank is dry, we're going to go ahead and paint this thing a dirt color. This here I've mixed up. This is just dirt color. I've got the recipe on the website that you can go to Walmart and have them mix it up for you. If you want to mix your own, that's fine. What I did is just took some dirt from outside and just mix up a paint similar to the color of that, only a couple shades lighter. Just go ahead and paint this thing solid brown. So just, I'm not going to leave the video running while I paint this whole thing, but it may take a couple coats of paint, because when you paint over the pink, sometimes it doesn't really cover everything. And the water is going to be darker. You'll notice that I've got ridges in here where I drew something on it. Well, you know, once we get the water in here, that's not going to make any difference, really. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is, once this brown dries, I'm going to go ahead and put black down at the bottom and kind of fade it up into the brown to make it appear that there's a little more depth here. What I did is a test here. I'm going to try to put a fish in the water as well, but this is the water that's tinted on top. And you probably can't see, but the very center round circle is a little bit darker than the rest. So, you know, and that's kind of the backbone of a fish. It's kind of swimming up through the water, and I'll show you how to do that next. So you notice that you can see a little bit of a depth around the middle fading out, but it's not critical. In other words, I'm going to do it, but you may not even worry about it if you don't want to. But I'm going to go ahead and do it to maybe add a little bit of depth to it. Okay, to start with, we're going to go ahead and paint the whole bottom of this black and probably blend it in about here. So I'm just going to start, you know, putting some black paint on down here. So we'll just paint that on, and I'm just going to use a brush. And probably about that much is just going to be solid black. It looks like I went a little too crazy with the black. I think I'm going to wipe a little bit of that up. I don't want to make a mess. So I am going to paint this whole front bottom section here black, and the black is still going to be wet, you know. Yeah, see, let's see that I got a little bit too much on there. Okay, So we got a strip of black that's still wet. Now once you get that black painted, wipe your brush out good. You don't have to wash it out, but just wipe it out good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the brown paint here and I'm going to put a nice stripe of brown around the top here. So a nice thick wide strip of brown up here. And you know what? Go ahead and just paint it all the way towards the top here. Okay, so we've got our bottom, we've got a nice strip of brown right here. And go ahead and paint your brown all the way down until it kind of meets up to the black. Till you get it just about like that. Okay, the next step what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of blend these together. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to work it down into the black a little bit. And then I'm just going to go back and forth and work it back up into the brown a little bit here. Okay? So it's fading it up. Now I'm going to work it back down into the black. Go down like this. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to work it all the way back up like this. Okay. So you can kind of see that we're just kind of going down into the black, and then we're kind of blending this back up into the brown, kind of like that. And that's going to give us sort of a faded effect from the dark to the light. Now if you want to, while you're at it, you can go ahead and take this black paint and kind of just paint it onto the front edge here. And then you can also sort of paint it onto the side. So I'm just put a little black here and I just kind of faded it back up a little on the side. And do the same thing with the back side here. It's not really critical, but you are going to see sort of a side view of this once the water's in place. So if this was light brown, it might look a little funny.